My dear friends, gamers, thinkers, welcome back to Tales of Praxis on a Monday evening in the middle of the best time of the year, summertime. I am your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withatterriblefate.com, your online home for all of the most in-depth, rigorous, and passionate analysis of the storytelling of your favorite video games. We've been doing Tales of Praxis as a streaming series and series of analytical articles for the past few months, dedicated just to digging into Namco's Tales JRPGs through the years. We started out when I got inspired by the release of Tales of Symphonia Remastered, because Symphonia was such a central experience of mine as a kid and as a gamer, and really inspiring me to think about the video game storytelling medium as an art form that was worth exploring and studying more deeply in general. And since then, we've been doing a whole lot of streaming, from Symphonia to Dawn of the New World through Zestiria, which just wrapped up this past week. But now, as Grail says, welcome back, Grail. Now we ball. We are going on to something else, namely to the DLC from Zestiria, Alisha's story, which I am really excited about for a few reasons. First, it's the first time I'm going to be playing content on the stream from a Tales game that I haven't played before. I'd played Zestiria before, but I never did its DLC back in the day. I think probably because I played Zestiria back before the DLC came out, as I was thinking about it. So this is going to be a lot of fun. For the sake of everyone who's enjoying these streams, I always suggest not doing spoilers, because I think it's as fun as it is to review the games and the series as we go through it. It can be, challenging for newcomers to have the key story content spoiled to them, and so I think it's always good to draw a line between drawing those connections and talking about what it is that you're experiencing, but not spoiling any of the twists and turns along the way. I'm going to be even more aggressive about that this time, because the spoilers apply to me, because I don't know what's coming next. So no spoilers, but this will be fun to get some more insight into Alisha's character. I did spoil for myself just the very general fact that in terms of where this comes in the narrative arc, it does follow up on the conclusion of Zestiria. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And then after we're done with this, we'll be turning to the Zestiria prequel, Tales of Berseria. So we're going to spend a lot of time not just in thinking about this world and the themes in it, but also about the way that all of these different and related stories build this complicated network of narrative commentary on the single fictional universe, which I think will be a lot of fun before we dive into some other entries in the series. Oh, grass is green. Grail, I'm banning you right now. It's been a good run, but that's where I draw the line. No, kidding, of course. It's all in good fun. And I wouldn't even bother to beat people over the head with it, except that we got spoiler bombed in the middle of the Zestiria stream by someone who literally just joined the chat to drop a spoiler, because I guess that's something that some people get joy out of. That is not the kind of appreciation of video games that we're all about here, though, so everyone can bear that in mind. I just don't get the fun or appeal to that, honestly. But maybe that's just me. I'm excited about this, too. I was thinking about it. It should be really fun, I think, to go into Alisha's story following on Zestiria with kind of bearing in mind our experience of Dawn of the New World after Tales of Symphonia. Because I think, especially knowing that Alisha's story also follows up on this narrative, Tales of Zestiria, that is, I think there's an interesting and kind of cool question we can pose, asking, what is the difference between a full-on sequel and a DLC in terms of how they extend the story and how they relate to the main story of the first game? Is there some kind of deep substantive difference to how they do that, or is it really just a difference in the length and the depth that they go into, since full games are obviously so much longer and more involved than DLC? One thought that I had, and again, this is purely me speculating because I haven't played this before, but in music especially, but also any kind of art form with kind of thematic arcs, whether that's music or literature or plays or anything else like that, there's this idea of a structural component called a coda, which is pretty much just a concluding element to the overall story or the overall work of music that's different in structure from the rest of the piece and kind of serves to add commentary or some other sense of conclusion to the work's themes in a way that wouldn't be possible if it stayed within the core main structure of the rest of the movement. And so I found myself wondering, especially since Alisha is, a character who was central in kicking off Soray's journey and then who kind of went her own way and we didn't see her through a lot of the rest of the game. It's interesting for me to wonder whether this DLC will kind of serve as a coda to the main story of the game in the same way. Because it's literally an addition to the game. It's something that was added after the fact. It also brings back this character who was a key part of the story early on. And so it'll be interesting, I think, if she ends up being used as this kind of lens or reprisal of her role in the story in order to add new insight to where we arrived at the end of Zestiria, the main game, and its overall conclusions and what it wanted us to think about. Oh, cool, Grail. You don't know anything about this too. Fantastic. Well, we can go through it for the first time together. So much the better. Yeah, that would be our luck, wouldn't it? We're talking about all of this significant narrative content, and then, we're going to start it up, and it'll give us the character of Alisha and just a giant labyrinth dungeon with no narrative content at all. But we both know Tales well enough to know that's not really going to be the case. Fingers crossed. I think I do want to jump right into this, but the last thing that I wanted to kind of set the scene with before we dig into it is, like I mentioned at the end of Zestiria, I think especially because we're taking the time to play first Zestiria and now the DLC and then Berseria, it's good to kind of keep track of what we think about the messages and content of the first game before we go on to the DLC, and then same thing for the first game and the DLC before we go on to the prequel. And so I thought, especially since this DLC is teed up to focus on Alisha and her story, it would be worth it just to dive in a little bit to kind of how I at least was thinking about her character in Zestiria. And this is all stuff we talked about before, but I wanted to just put it fresh in everyone's minds before we jumped into this. So, I was thinking about her and back to how we saw her at the beginning of the game and then how she returned at the end of the game. I think the thing to me that came off as really interesting about her was the way that she's sort of a union or a marriage of a knight's honor, but also like the political obligation and acumen of nobility, because she's Alisha, the princess knight, right? She has the standing within her kingdom to actually influence politics to some extent, but she's also she's somewhat distant from the throne. She's not well liked by other politicians, and she has this sense of the deep duty that kind of begets a knight more so than a politician. Which also we saw was what drew her away from Soray after she served as his squire for a time. This fact that she felt duty and obligation to her country and its role on the world stage. So great for the shepherd to be able to help with that. But the shepherd, obviously, at the end of the day, had a different mandate than simply saving Highlands people or securing the future of that polity in the way that Alisha felt obligated to. I was thinking also about the way that she relates to all of those ideas of purification and malevolence and just reflective action and choice of what we value, all the things that we were talking about in the finale of Zestiria. And I think she's kind of a good case study of that too, in the sense that I think another way in which her knightly nature as a politician comes out is that throughout the game, even when we kind of get little windows into her in side quests, we always see her taking action and trying to, to paraphrase Gandhi, to be the change that she wishes to see in her kingdom. Which sounds maybe very trite and simple, but remember, this is couched in the context of a kingdom and a world where most politicians are these shady, malevolent folks who are staying behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and manipulating everyone else in order to achieve their own agendas in the towns and kingdoms, which I think you could argue is a big part of why, as Soray enters those different kingdoms in the human world, so many of those places are so deep deeply corrupted. It's in many cases, I think, because of the power structures and political structures at play from these people whom it takes so long to even discover because they're so embedded in the shadows, as opposed to Alisha, who is out there trying to actively work and advocate for her kingdom and its people. So I think in that sense, even though her sense of duty and what she values is more specified and worldly than the shepherds, it makes a lot of sense as we're thinking about like how she's situated in her world and what she does, that she would be this beacon of purification and a candidate to be the shepherd squire, which is of course what actually happened in Zestiria. And then the last part that I wanted to call out, just because, again, I don't know what's going to factor into this DLC or not, but I think especially at the end, remember, like, one of the last really touching sequences we got with her before the end of the game was confronting Maltran, her mentor, who taught her how to fight, how to use a spear, and who it turned out, speaking of these evil people behind the scenes, Maltran wasn't malevolent, but she had aligned herself with interests that were deeply against those of Highland's prosperity, namely with the Lord of Calamity, and she had been kind of ruthlessly using and molding and grooming Alisha since her childhood to serve a role and basically function as a pawn in Maltran's agenda to cause war and further the Age of Chaos at the behest of Heldolf, right? And so I think as Alisha kind of broke down and was forced to reconcile that with everything else, I think we really saw a sense in which she was forced to adjudicate like her own sense of self and her commitment to honest actions versus like how everyone else in her life, even her mentors and the people she holds close to her, were always acting with ulterior motives and trying to manipulate and influence other people for underhanded or shadowy reasons. So I think that was a big part of sort of her personal struggle of finding her place in the world. And I think the fact that Maltran kind of forced her to confront that fact upon Maltran's death was a big part of what gave Alisha the clarity to finally step up and go out in the open and in the honest action first way that Alisha always does, actually join with Sergei to try to coordinate not just a truce, but maybe even a positive future for both Rollins and Highland, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Good question, Grail. This actually... I have to just make a note in my like pre-stream routine to mute the PlayStation so that doesn't keep happening. That also came up during the Symphonia stream because, Symphonia also obviously has an anime. That's not really something that I've gone into in the past. We briefly entertained the idea of doing like a watch party stream back again when I was doing Symphonia with the Symphonia anime. I don't know. I mean, I think it could be interesting depending on how deep we want to go into this particular world. I think part of the reason that I love these games is not just that I love interactive storytelling in general, but also that I think they do a lot of interesting stuff in terms of forcing the player, as we've been doing throughout these streams, to think really kind of rigorously and in depth about her relationship to the game and her role in it, even though it's not a game that's heavily like decision based in the way you might think of something like a Mass Effect, where your choices like radically change the outcome of the narrative. So that was a big part of what inspired me to, name the series even Tales of Praxis, but also to dig into the games. So, and the anime obviously is not interactive in that sense, although I do think, especially since it's treating the same world and story, kind of doing a compare and contrast case of, okay, what does this story look like when it is a game and it is interactive versus as a non-interactive anime, and how might those differences even shed further light on like the themes of the fiction itself and what it's trying to say overall. I think that could be interesting, which is a very long-winded way of saying I'm not sure. I could probably be talked into it. I hadn't been planning it, but it could definitely be fun. I would need to figure out how to get it and the mechanics of that and everything else, but I'm sure those are problems that have been solved already in the past. So that's the great thing about the Tales games, right? In the Tales series, there's always more content no matter which direction you look in. Grail, you'll appreciate this too. I tweeted about this earlier, but I finally took the plunge earlier today to basically fill out the rest of my Tales library so that I can have access to all of the content that they've released in the West. I didn't actually have that many holes in the library, as it turns out. But I didn't have Tales of Eternia released in the West as Tales of Destiny 2 for hilarious reasons of marketing and localization. And I didn't have Tales of Hearts because I never got a Vita. So I got both of those. And my PS3 also crapped out last year, so I had to replace my PS3. And because I wanted to just be complete, I got Tales of the World Radiant Mythology, the Tales version of Zestiria, kind of, if Final Fantasy fans are watching but are less familiar with the Tales series, the one that Namco also ported to the West. So I am fully equipped and prepared to play through at least all of the games with official Western releases as part of Tales of Praxis, and I may or may not try to get, fan translations and localizations of the other ones, just because I would love to play it all, but those are obviously harder to access. In some regards. Yeah, okay. I can definitely make a deal to at least watch it in my own time, Grail. I will commit to that. We'll see whether it makes sense on the stream. Yeah, and also, shout out to you, Grail. A big part of why I was especially so excited about Hearts was all the love that you've given it. That's definitely not unique. I think Hearts is one of those funny games where I think relatively few people have played it, but every time it's come up in a conversation, even on the stream when I've been talking about Tales games, everyone right away is, I love that game. It's one of the best ones in the series. I wish more people played it. So I'm excited to finally play it. I also, I don't know if this resonates with anyone else, but there was something always so inexplicably magical to me about the PSP system. I've always kind of loved handheld gaming, and I think Sony did a really kind of unbelievable job of making their handheld kind of magical, because it really felt like a PlayStation that you could just pick up and take and experience anywhere. And so my memories of playing things like Birth by Sleep and Crisis Core, as much as I love those games themselves, I think are especially colored by my love and appreciation for the system. And everything I've heard just says the Vita is even better than that, quite possibly the best handheld system ever designed. That's what my friend and colleague Dan Hughes says about it. So I'm excited not just to experience a new handheld system that's supposed to be great, but to experience it through the context of a game I've never played in one of my favorite and most influential series of JRPGs. So I can't wait to do that. I know it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to have a lot to say about it, knowing me and just knowing how I think about these things. Well, and listen, Grail, if I just use the Vita as a Tales of Hearts machine, which in all likelihood is what I'll do, I will still feel as though it's paid for itself. So no complaints there. Yes, but so I'm excited. We're working through this. I finally made it into the third act of Tales of Vesperia after 60 hours. I forgot how long that game is, and obviously now playing the definitive edition, that only further extends things, which is interesting. I don't know if this is if this warrants an article or analysis in itself, but I think one of the things that's interesting and kind of makes it hard for me to find my footing with Vesperia is I feel like it just if you compare it to the other Tales games, its story is just, I think, significantly longer than most of the other ones. Which is not that's not a weird thing for JRPGs. We've talked ad nauseum on the stream about the Xenoblade Chronicles series, each game of which is much longer than a Tales game. So I'm used to playing long JRPGs, but I think the thing that is weird and gives me sort of an uncanny experience in Vesperia is because I'm experiencing it as a Tales game, and most Tales games are more compressed in what they're trying to say and how they get you to experience it. It's just very different pacing than I'm used to for this particular series, which makes it harder for me to wrap my head around the various plot beats and how the themes are building and keep track of it all through the same interpretive lens. So I'm definitely interested to kind of, once I'm done with that playthrough, step back, take stock of it all as a whole, and think about how it works in comparison with some of those other Tales games that we've been playing as part of the stream and part of the series. See, this is part of why I'm interested in my replay of it, Grail, because that was definitely my initial experience of it too. And I think that was part of why when I first played it, I felt kind of alienated by it. I didn't really feel like I got it. And for a long time, I said it was like not just one of my least favorite Tales games, but also one that disappointed me because I didn't get an overall sense of what was going on. This time, though, as we're doing with all the games in the Tales of Praxis series, I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt and see, after we're done with it, like what can really tie the overall plot together. Because I think, and we don't need to make this first stream of Zestiria's DLC a whole Vesperia conversation, but I will say, I forget whether this came up last time, but one thing that is interesting to me in playing Vesperia, especially right after Zestiria, is I think so much of Vesperia's DNA is concerned with these questions of what it is to figure out, like, not even your own destiny, but just like what it is that you want to do, and then figuring out like what it takes to go out and do that in the world and also work with other people for it, in a very similar way to, the way that Saray focuses on empowering everyone to figure out what their dreams are and what they really care about, and for them to go off and tell their own stories. But it's like, it's that cranked up to like 11 in Vesperia, I feel, with even things as simple as like every like 30 to 45 minutes, like after every dungeon or small arc in Vesperia, the party will get back together and have a whole discussion of like, okay, where's this party member going next? What's this party member going to do? Does this party member want to stay with the group or leave? So there's much more just like checking in on where's our quest taking us next, and does that still align with what you want out of your life? Which I think lends itself to the way in which the game feels unfocused, but I think is also part of like the core thematic structure of what it is the game is trying to say. So I think it's interesting, and I was talking with Dan about this a while ago, like there are games and stories that feel unfocused or confusing or that people don't like because there are like issues with the story structure. And then I think there are other games that have confusing experiences or feel unfocused or hard to read because that's part of like the point of the story and what the game is trying to say. And especially as I've gone back into the Tales series and just gotten more appreciation for the individual members in the series as a whole, I feel like Vesperia falls into that latter category, which is part of why I'm trying to really give it the benefit of the doubt and see what we can do with it in the review. Like I said, I just got into the third act, so it's and I do remember how very different it is, as you're saying, Grail. So I'm excited to play through that with fresh eyes, and then I'm sure we'll have occasion to talk about it more on the stream as well. But as I said, we could keep talking about that and every other Tales game for the 3 hours and more. Let me once again welcome you all to Tales of Praxis, and let's dive into Alisha's story. Something new for the lot of us. Bonus chapter. That's an interesting way to frame it. The Strength of a Knight. An episode centered on Alisha, which takes place after the completion of the main game, and focused heavily on the epilogue of the main scenario. All right. Well, that sounds like it's teeing up what I was hoping in terms of the DLC acting as a kind of coda. So thank goodness we played the main game first. It's almost like we were prepared and did things in order. How about that? Oh, and you can do a kind of quasi New Game Plus with it by porting over, like, I guess I would assume the level of Alisha and similar things from the main story. And then you can also replay the episode using data from the episode. So it's like multiple levels of New Game Plus in keeping with the complexity of the main Zestiria game. Like if it weren't something new and complicated to learn, we wouldn't be in the same universe. Okay, Grail. Well, since you said that, I'll spend like 2 more seconds on Vesperia, and then we can dive into this. One thing that is interesting, because I mean JRPGs have multiple climaxes all the time, right? And I don't know if this is like a common term in the vernacular, but I oftentimes talk about games like Vesperia and several of the Tales games as having false endings where everything seems like it's building towards a very clear conclusion that's going to wrap up the game, but then the story goes on. And that definitely happens in Vesperia. I think that one thing that kind of encouraged me to see that with new eyes as well was, as you know, Grail, I also recently replayed Tales of the Abyss as part of Tales of Praxis, and I was really surprised by how kind of unexpectedly similar to me I found the transition from the second act into the third act of Tales of Vesperia, or kind of the party fragments to the wind. It's not clear how much time has passed, and then you have to start out by getting the gang back together. And you get a very similar thing in flavor in Tales of the Abyss, right? Where, with spoilers for Tales of the Abyss, I guess, for anyone who's watching the stream and hasn't played it, after the first face-off with Van at the radiation gate, I think it's not the absorption gate, right? I think it's the radiation gate. When the gang thinks that they've killed him, then similarly, like, you get a time skip, everyone's separated, and then you have to get the gang back together. So I think having that at least as a frame of reference and background context has made me feel like I at least have my footing a bit more in what Vesperia is trying to do. But again, it's kind of like they crank even that up to 11, because even relative to other JRPGs with false endings, I would say, they really play up like the conclusion of Act 2 with the fight against Alexei being the conclusion to the story, with all the same beats you would expect from a Tales game, with, having the intimate heart-to-heart conversations with everyone the night before, the big elaborate dungeon leading up to Alexei. And I almost wonder, again, like, knowing the amount of thought and care that's put into these games, whether that was kind of intentional, like if it was meant for the person who is well-versed in Tales games and they want you to expect that to be the end. So again, I find myself wondering, now that I've been playing them all just rapid fire, like, my antenna are up to ask the question, oh, is this a trick that they're playing on me on purpose, like a magic trick or sleight of hand to kind of ultimately try to teach me a lesson or show me some meaning in the game that wouldn't otherwise be possible. So definitely get where you're coming from. I felt the same way, but I'll definitely keep you posted as I wrap up my playthrough of the game to see whether I end up feeling like I learned something new, or if I end up feeling just as cheated as I did the first time. I think it could go either way right now, if I'm being honest with you. I think since we did take the time to just play Zestiria, and we're playing through the DLC as an addendum to its story, it makes sense to me, in terms of our approach to it, to do the New Game Plus and carry over what we had at the end of our main game playthrough. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, I'm so excited. Playing something brand new in a series that I love with my real-life JRPG party. Not a bad way to spend a Monday night. New record in terms of the most quickly we've started the game, or the longest we've chatted beforehand, Grail? I've kind of lost track because I've been enjoying these pre-game conversations with you so much.
Has been very fruitful. All of Highland deeply appreciates your cooperation.
Thank you kindly. I hope His Majesty is pleased.
Such formalities are unnecessary. It is we who ought to be thanking you. Princess, I plan to submit my letter of resignation shortly. We no longer... Chancellor Barlow may not have been entirely scrupulous, but I cannot deny his efficacy in pursuing national interest. Now that he has passed away, the Council is no more than a redundant appendage of useless gray hairs, as this inspection has demonstrated to me.
I very much doubt that, Chancellor.
Come now, there's no need to pamper the old guard with the new guard standing before.
Lord Mathia.
Next, I will call on the entire Council to view your operations as I have done. I trust they too will come to the same realization. That it is not we on the Council ushering in the new era, but a pair of knights. I leave our nations and our world in your capable hands.
So we're moving away from the image of that horrible shadow council that confronted Saray and Alisha really early in Tales of Zestiria, the first time they came to Lady Lake.
It's to something he won't back down.
Meaning, we're close to a peace treaty.
Yes.
I will return to Pendragon. I would like to...
Goodbye, evil shadow government. We hardly knew ye.
Very well. But if it were only us two, the new era would be no more than a dream. It's Saray whose light led us out from the age of chaos. Anyway, I think I've earned a night's rest, and then some. Back to you.
Understatement of the year. Oh no. Oh, that night looked malevolent. Why is there still malevolence? I thought Saray killed Heldolf. Are you telling me that purging the Lord of Calamity doesn't solve all the world's problems? Oh, it's already feeling a little like Dawn of the New World, if that's the message. Like saving the world is not the same thing as fixing all the world's problems. Oh, it's got a different background color for the save file. I love that. It's easy to delight me when we're
3 months already since I last
when we're playing a new game in a series I love so
Saray and
much.
the others are doing well. If only he'd drop back in once in a while.
So we've had a 3-month jump since, I guess maybe since the negotiations started. Probably not since the end of last game, because there were a lot of events in the conclusion to the game that happened after Saray and Alisha parted ways.
I'd love to show Saray how the city's doing now.
That's the beauty of the hero's journey, Grail. It's a cycle, so it fixes everything and yet nothing, because then you have to go on another hero's journey. Which, I mean, if there were any game to talk about that in, like, at least Zestiria was very clear from its, like, literal voiced-over prologue that it's all about cycles of shepherds and lords of calamity, so I think that's kind of baked into what they want us to be thinking about anyway.
As if he needs me. He and the others yet journey on. I'm sure they've stopped in here more than once. Who goes there?
Alisha, you'll pay for your treason!
A pro-war extremist.
My oh my.
Please,
There's always one.
what we need now is a peace treaty to bring an end to the war.
Silence, traitor!
There's something wrong with him.
Learn how to play and yet notice, like, what a stark change from the base game where every few minutes, even in the finale, we'd be getting a new tutorial. And now we're thrown into the first battle with no tutorial at all. Like, I guess, and it seems like it plays the same way as the last game. But also, that's a big thing to wrap your head around when you don't have any Seraphim, and so the flow of combat is going to be radically different than the last game. That's right, that's all it takes, Demon Fang! Or Azure Blast, I guess. One or the other. Azure Edge, is that it? I guess Azure Blast is a variation of it. One of those Azure arts.
Strength. Could he be? A Hellion? Oh no! Without a squire's powers of purification, there's nothing I can do.
Pray all you like, princess. It won't save you.
Who's there? Where are you? Who are you?
Saray can't come running, my dear.
What are you saying?
I'm saying your precious shepherd boy is gone.
What? Ah!
Oh, is it Rose? Oh!
That was a close one.
Rose!
Well, I won't rule out the schizophrenia, but probably hearing that voice now, it's too early to rule it in either. It was interesting though, thinking of like little things already in the game's presentation, because we could see that knight was a Hellion based on seeing the malevolence flowing off of him, but Alisha didn't seem sure that he was a Hellion. Like, she asked her in the battle, oh, is he a Hellion, the way he's just so maliciously attacking me? Which makes me wonder whether, as the players, like, is our point of view supposed to be colored by Alicia's perspective, or are we seeing it from like a different perspective, whether that's the perspective of the Seraphim or maybe Rose, or someone who like is justified in being able to perceive that malevolence in the way that we can. So little things.
That was a close one.
Rose!
This is a critical time for the peace process, Alisha. Don't ever let your guard down.
My apologies, and thank you very much.
Cool.
Wait, where's Saray? Aren't you with him?
You alright?
I was told that the shepherd was gone.
You were told? By who?
I couldn't say. I only heard his voice.
Yeah, I think I might have been when you weren't in the stream, Grail, but in a lot of the earlier stream we talked about like the way it kind of straddles the gap between reality and like magic realism, because sometimes it seems like you're seeing what is actually there. Sometimes it seems like it's colored by or limited to someone's like more limited perspective, especially in terms of, like we were just talking about, whether and how things like malevolence or the seraphim or even like the shepherd's armatized form, how those things are perceived. Things like the miracle of raising the foundation for the bridge on the way to Marland really early in the game, after you meet up with Edna, right? Which is actually part of why I'm really interested and excited to dig back into Berseria after this, because say what you will about the game's combat system and everything else, one thing that I remember being really struck by, and we'll see this as we get into that game, was sort of a similar deftness of artistic representation in terms of how they color what you're seeing and experiencing in the game with different characters' perspectives. So I don't know if that was just a particular thing that the team that worked on these games was especially good at, or if it was like one of the core aspects of storytelling that they were trying to represent the world with. But I find myself attending to that in these two games much more so than I do in a lot of the other Tales games.
Agreed. Major bad vibes. We better look into this.
Rose?
Listen to me, Alisha. Have Nath put you up for the night. His house is pretty secure. Lock all the doors and sleep tight.
See ya. Hey! The way she acted, something must have happened to Saray. I must discern the truth forthwith. Too formal.
Oh, cute. She's trying to figure out how to be a regular person. Oh, that's sweet. Her loyal followers, the knights, care about her well-being. Oh yeah, so we rolled in at level 87. That's not a bad deal. I can live with that. Until we face the boss that's like level 160, right, Grail? Just wait. It's actually called an EX DLC. Boy, so one of the first things that I'm noticing diving into this on the heels of Zestiria is you really get a sense of loneliness and sort of like maybe the way in which Alicia's burden and duties are really isolating because she has to shoulder so much alone. Because, like, look, as we're wandering around in the town, it's so much quieter, not just because it's nighttime and there aren't people about, but because, you know, if Saray were walking around at night, even when he wasn't with Rose, he would have all of the Seraphim traveling within him, alongside him. Like, he always had, speaking of schizophrenic, right? But he had a whole team of personalities and voices through which to share his experiences and duties all the time throughout the game. Whereas now it's just poor Alisha monologuing to herself. Gives you a pretty visceral sense of why she suffered so much with her obligations and her duties in the base game.
Rose, thank goodness.
Huh?
Oh, this is interesting.
Tell me what transpired. The battle with the Lord of Calamity and what came of it.
Whoa, settle down. I just got back. Let a girl get something in her stomach first.
Then let's continue the discussion over a meal, I beg you.
So, I can handle it.
Are the Seraphim here too? Lila, please tell me the truth.
Sheesh, you don't give up, do you?
That's the depth of her feelings on this issue.
Oh, that's so cool.
Tell her. Lila, Edna.
So none of you care about my feelings, is that it?
Then if you can't tell me, at least tell me why you can't tell me.
So to say the obvious, but this is so cool now that we're seeing the game from Alicia's perspective. Like, in contrast with what I was saying about the Hellion, this is very clearly from her perspective because we as players are so accustomed to this kind of skit conversation setup from the first game. But of course, Alisha can't see the Seraphim. And even, like, look at the framing of this skit. Like, Alisha and Rose are there, but they take up such a relatively small part of the scene. And if you think back to the skits from the main game, you can almost imagine and overlay like all the Seraphim who would be surrounding Rose and Saray in their conversations. And now we know, like, at least Lila and maybe all of them are actually there, but we don't have the window into actually seeing them. So we're going to get, I think, a lot of the perspective that Saray and the others mused about over the course of the main game, with how kind of disenfranchising it can be to the Seraphim to not be seen and therefore not able to like extend their blessing or relate to so many of the humans in the world.
Well, that didn't work.
Please, Rose.
I told you, I just got back. Give me a little time to rest, will you?
Wow, that's really cool. I wonder if we'll be able to see them at some point in the way that Saray was able to extend his resonance to Alisha, or if they'll be invisible through this whole chapter.
Princess Alisha, will you be joining her?
Excuse me? Sorry, what?
Your friend. She requested a table and supper for the both of you.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, that's why I made that comment of how interesting that was at the top of it, because I obviously from like Zestiria backward in the game series, they don't do a lot of that like skit-based storytelling in the main game. The whole conceit of skits is that it's something that sort of adds another layer of optional storytelling and this different art style overlaid onto the navigation of the main story. Grail, I had actually totally forgotten that they do that in Berseria. So yeah, I guess it's always interesting in playing these games to see the way that their ideas and systems evolve over the course of the games. And with something like that, especially if they wanted to be experimental with using a mainstay of the series like skits in a new way, it makes a lot of sense to me and is actually really cool to see how they kind of tried that out in sort of a DLC format where it's easier to test new ideas before then bringing it to a mainline flagship title, or mothership title, I guess the Tales series call it, in Tales of Berseria.
Thank you.
Please wait here. The food is nearly prepared. Oh, there we go. It's ready to be served anytime.
Thanks.
Excellent. Nothing like food. Oh, I guess we are supposed to go somewhere else. Wasn't sure if we were supposed to wait there. Oh yeah? Tell me, Grail, how are you going to play it? While you type, I'll call out before we go on. One other thing that's kind of interesting, speaking of, seeing this as sort of an intermediary evolutionary phase between Zestiria and Berseria, as we'll see without really spoilers for Berseria, because you can tell this just from the cover, like, one of the things that Berseria is most obviously remarkable for is that it centers on like a single female protagonist in the way that hadn't really been done in the series before. Like there have been female main characters, but not with the same sort of solo focus. And so it's interesting as this kind of middle ground between Zestiria and then Berseria to have this little bonus chapter that, at least so far, is being teed up to similarly be focused on female characters between Alisha, obviously, but then even Alisha's relationship with Rose, perhaps.
Rose. Rose.
Yes? Oh, she's gone.
Seriously?
Alisha asks for so little from these people.
Rose, I will get the truth from you. If she's trying to avoid me, she won't head for Lady Lake. That leaves Lasting then.
Yeah, I will be really interested to hear how that goes, Grail. I know exactly what you mean in terms of it seeming like frustrating in two different directions, depending on the particular moments or what it is that you're trying to do. So I'll be interested to see how you find that as I play through it on probably much less of a challenge run than what you'll be doing, so we can almost have two different windows into it. I love that. So this is interesting that Rose is avoiding Alisha after Alisha asked the truth about Saray. The most obvious thought is maybe, Rose is just trying to spare Alicia's feelings, but I'm also wondering in terms of like the way that Lila wasn't able to tell Saray or anyone else about like the past and the history of the previous shepherd, and even in a similar vein to like in Dawn of the New World, the way that Lloyd had to operate in secret and like keep the name of the New World tree hidden from Ratatosk in order to protect its power. I wonder if there's almost a taboo on talking about what Saray did, or the fact that he revived Mautalis and is now like resting with Mautalis in order to reconstitute his blessing on the world. Like if they utter the truth about that, if that'll negate its world healing effect in one way or another. Oh, and we can fast jump. Love it. Fast travel, I guess. So portmanteau of fast travel and quick jump.
I finally found you, Rose.
Alisha? You came after me? That was fast.
I'm determined. Now, tell me what happened.
Oh, whoa, that's almost like a Tails version of the Nuzlocke challenge in Pokemon Grail. I love that. I think that's really interesting, especially because actually, just a couple days ago, I was talking with my friend and colleague Matt McGill, who actually, if viewers watched the Dawn of the New World stream, he was actually a guest participant when he came and visited me for a while. But he's really into Pokemon, and as he's gotten older, he's gotten really into like glitch runs and challenge runs of Pokemon of various kinds. And different like modded versions to basically make it harder. And he sent me this really interesting thought, asking basically like, man, I wonder whether part of why these challenge runs of Pokemon are so popular is like, as we get older, we're trying to sort of recapture the experience that we had with this kind of game as a kid, but because we're better at games now, we kind of need to figure out ways to ramp up the challenge in order for it to feel like as epic or intense an experience. And so I'll be really interested to see kind of whether any of your other thoughts on Berseria or what it's all about change as you give yourself those challenge parameters. I have a feeling you won't suck, Grail. I'll be rooting for you. And we can support each other through through our 2 playthroughs. It'll be fun.
I'm not about to do that. You should have picked up on that by now, Miss Princess Knight. Shut up.
I don't understand. Why?
'Cause I won't.
That makes no sense.
It doesn't need to make sense.
I'm Soray's squire. I have the right to know.
There it goes. I said shut up already.
Oh.
You and I live in different worlds now. It was the path you chose yourself, remember, sweet princess?
You're mocking me?
I had no intention of doing so, and if I upset you, I regret my error. Your Highness, please accept my apologies.
Stop it! I'm not your princess, I'm your friend!
So logical. We've never been friends.
What?
Our paths are different.
Rose!
Got it?
Ooh.
I've always
Wow.
been...
What? You've never had someone fight back? Oh, right, I guess not. Can't touch the pretty, pretty princess.
You don't know the first thing about me!
How would I?
You don't even understand how fortunate you are, Rose!
A princess in anguish. Very iconic.
Rose! I've always thought of us as friends! How can you say such cruel, terrible
Yeah, this is a
things?
proper catfight, isn't it?
Then don't make me say them.
I can't really think of another one of those in the Tales series.
How could you?
Tears, huh? Aren't we girly?
Oh, they're there.
Ugh, make it stop.
We're strange.
Should we do something, Edna?
You and I have
Nah,
nothing to do
they're
with
both
each other.
sorta right. And they're both sorta wrong. And besides, these two are only ever gonna be the bestest of friends or the worstest of enemies. No one knows.
You've got no intention of listening, I can tell.
True.
You knew nothing about me.
Still, I gotta admit, I never thought they'd take it this far.
Why?
I imagine no one's more surprised than they themselves.
Again?
I loved it. It's such a small thing, I think I mentioned this in the Zestiria base game run, but the way that they have the like background conversations while a main conversation is happening in scenes, it just adds so much like more depth to the scenes, and it's a little more to keep track of. But playing through so many other games and JRPGs and even Tales games, like you kind of, it's the kind of thing I find myself missing once I go to a game that doesn't do it after something like this.
Give me a break.
It's up to you.
My feelings aren't gonna change.
Nor mine.
Alisha?
I'll be back tomorrow. You know by now you can't run from me. I suggest you wait here.
No, I mean, where are you going? It's dark outside.
I'm heading out to sleep in the barracks, just like any other night.
But the anti-pacifists are after you. It's dangerous.
What do you care? You and I are strangers, no? I know why you're doing this, Rose. Something awful happened with Saray, I can tell. I know you don't want to burden me with that knowledge. Not when I'm finally making progress along the path I chose. I understand. I really do. But we're friends.
Yeah, by the fans, you mean, Grail? I don't know if you could tell, I was pretty caught off guard by it in a positive way, I think. Because especially after the base game of Zestiria, where everything is very kind of like spiritual and kept at arm's length, and almost more of an allegory sometimes than a literal story. There was something kind of unnerving and visceral just about that, like sudden, unexpected violence. And yeah, maybe it got silly after a while, but I felt like it was a very sort of real representation of their emotions, in just the way you would expect of two squires who are really in touch with the connection between their emotions and their actions in the world. And also just really representative of like the implications for, well, what would it look like for the disciples after, Jesus was crucified and sacrificed himself, right? Where kind of all they had in common was this savior who is now gone. And all the more so for something like the shepherd, Saray, whose whole point was to empower everyone to walk their own paths. And so, yeah, Alisha and Rose are both obviously in their own ways, like very invested in empowering everyone to do what they believe is right. But when it comes down to who Rose and Alisha are as individuals, like they bring that about in radically different ways, where Rose is like the morally upstanding assassin and Alisha is the knight. So I feel like Edna points out, there's some truth and some lack of truth to what they're saying, where like it rung true where Rose said that very sort of flat line, we're not friends, is when you think about the relationship that they had through Zestiria, they didn't really have one. They were just connected through Saray, who's now gone, right? And in the absence of that, like obviously they're still connected, which is the sense in which they, aren't really seeing the truth, but it's like a connection that they have to work towards now as humans with different agendas, rather than acting for the sake of the world like they were able to do in Zestiria, which I think is a nice sort of microcosm of what it would look like in the aftermath of saving the world, where, okay, now if people are really able to act in accordance with their wills and what they believe is right, like we were talking about at the end of Zestiria, different people are going to believe in different agendas. And so like the real business of living and actually improving the world comes from a lot of those visceral confrontations and uncomfortable conversations, and the sort of things that Saray fought to make possible, but are still going to be painful and hard to achieve in the wake of his sacrifice. Yeah, exactly that, Grail. Exactly that. Without a mediator, it is literally unmediated, right? Where instead of being able to like have the filtered perspective of seeing eye to eye in terms of both wanting to achieve the shepherd's mission, which would, allow people like Rose and Alicia to collaborate and put their differences aside. Now they're kind of only their differences, and they have to find their way back to their similarities and shared values on their own. I'm gonna guess that's probably where the arc is going.
Why did I have to go and be like that? I really am just a silly little girl.
Oh no, now there's 3 of them.
Rose, I can handle this myself.
Oh.
What in the world is she saying? Is she still angry?
This is pointless. Please cease at once.
Traitor!
Hellions. Are we not both human? Do we not both seek the well-being of our world? So long as our quarrel continues, those we cherish can never be at peace. We can never show them we're all right.
What?
I think she doesn't wish to drag you any further into the societal problems caused by the war.
But they're Hellions. Alicia won't stand a chance.
Shut up!
Please, you must listen to me.
Even so, she wants to settle this herself without relying on you. Perhaps she hopes it might inspire you to relax and talk to her without worrying for her safety.
Alicia, you big doof.
If she could purify them herself, it'd be 2 birds, 1 stone, win-win, happy, happy, dead birds sometimes.
The most Edna line in the
Just,
world.
Saying.
Come, Rose. Let us form a squire pact with her. Fine. If I have to.
Alicia's not the only doof.
I told you not to.
Hey. Wanna be my squire?
Huh?
So you can do it yourself.
Yes.
So Rose has inherited the mantle of shepherd, I guess.
A new bud forms on the holy branch. Its flowers bring fruit. Its fruit begets seeds. The circle of destiny turns once more. Give life unto the will of the shepherd, and let it be proof of their bond. Thy true name as a squire shall be... Sylvia Amechia!
Huh? Well, that's a mouthful.
Lila, Edna, it's lovely to see you again.
Oh.
Show me what you can do!
I hope we get to find out more about how and why Rose became the shepherd after Saray took his 1,000-year nap, or however long it was. Wait. Oh, okay. For a second, I thought Alicia was going to be able to armatize now, and I was going to have 3 to 20 follow-up questions, but it doesn't seem like she can. Awesome. I need to look at this girl's arts. I can't tell if she's slow or she just doesn't have anything set. Yeah, we don't have anything set. That's what's going on. Well, let's set some stuff. Grail, not only does that make sense, that is maybe the perfect analogy in my mind. You're saying inferior spear girl because you love Judy, right? The difference is Alisha is just spear girl as opposed to dragoon girl. Yeah, harder to wield a spear in all its glory when you're condemned to stay on the ground. Oh, I guess she did like a little pole vault with it there, though. So maybe she can get a little airborne at least. Yeah, Mid is right.
You wield that spear like an umbrella.
It's beautiful, but it is an umbrella.
Oh, she gets to have conversations with the Seraphim. I'm loving this already. This is a lot of fun.
Splendid. Well done, Alisha.
Yeah, could have been worse.
Hardly. Had you two not been here, I would have been entirely overwhelmed. I am unready.
Yeah, that wasn't enough to prove yourself.
Good night.
Rose? Alisha?
Fun times indeed.
Boy, this is interesting in terms of the, like what I was talking about with the dynamics of focusing on female roles, because I only just made the realization looking at the group of them there. Like, not only is it a focus on Alisha and Rose, but we also only have the two female Seraphim with them. So it's like a total girl group, which is a very unusual dynamic in Tales games. Yeah, I don't know if I would call it monotone myself, Grail. I would call it almost sardonic, just like always a little bit wry and like a little bit sarcastic. Yeah, that's true. And Mikleo wanted to go on his own adventure to kind of travel the world and study the ruins like we saw at the end of the game. Which kind of raises the question all the more for me of like, okay, so what was it that inspired Edna and Lila to stick around? I'm assuming Lila because she's still the Prime Lord, so maybe we'll get an explanation in terms of what it is that led Rose to make the pact with her and take up the mantle of Shepherd, and maybe Edna because she just didn't have anywhere else to go now that her brother is gone. But it is interesting that these are the ones whose lot has been cast with one another for this next chapter.
Oh, were you changing? Perfect.
Perfect? Wait, first close the door.
Get ready, Alisha.
What? Ah!
She gonna get a new outfit? Marketing in the sense of what Grail, just like the idea that it's focusing on female characters kind of for the sake of advertising that. Is that what you mean? I'm not even quite sure what I'm supposed to do here. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much that dynamic becomes a central part of the story versus if it was just sort of a more superficial decision. I think it is interesting in the sense that, you had sort of the standard male hero leading the party in the last one and carrying the weight of everything, and now that he's gone, they kind of have to figure out how to be their own leaders. So I'm sure someone more embedded in like women and gender studies could say much more interesting stuff about that than I could, but that strikes me as something that is at least an interesting follow-up story to tell, especially something that's so typically masculine in terms of drawing from King Arthur stuff and Christ stuff like we talked about. Yeah, it's weird because I feel like I'm having a stroke. I can't actually like move the cursor down to like set attachments or her hair or costume. I'm pushing all the buttons, but it doesn't seem to actually be doing anything. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to figure it out later if we desperately want to change her outfit. Weird. New threads! And a very loud hat.
And why exactly am I in formal dress?
Those anti-pacifist extremists are pretty much all hellions, right? Makes me think there might be someone even worse controlling.
It's a very different look for our Princess Knight.
So I've made up my mind to get to the bottom of this.
That still doesn't answer my question.
Bait.
It seems fashionable, but I'm so used to thinking of her as a knight. It's hard for me to wrap my head around this.
Remarkable Alisha Difta of Highland. Now, go get mugged.
What?
Hey, you formed a friggin' squire pact with me yesterday, remember? You're supposed to cooperate with me.
Oh, but that's interesting though, because like Princess Knight, she has the nobility and also the status as like a hero and warrior, and so they're almost like taking advantage of her noble standing as bait in order to actually accomplish the ends of a knight. That's fun. That seems like good costume-based storytelling, especially for a series like Tales that's so self-consciously interested in that.
Wait, the pact was between you and me?
Yep.
Not Saray?
Nope.
Understood. If we want to know whether or not
Why would she say understood? Ask a million follow-up questions about why she's the shepherd now. Alisha!
behind these extremists, we've got to find their hideout. And you'd like me to be the one who lures them out of hiding?
You're not gonna ask me why the squire pact is between you and me?
You wouldn't tell me anyway, would you?
Well, true.
And we just get left out of the loop, is that it?
Oh dear, that wasn't my intention. Forgive me.
Thank you for your help, Alisha.
Look,
Alrighty, then we
Rose, I understand if you don't want to tell Alisha, but can you, like, take us aside and tell us?
Acceleration hinges on you. Hence, I'm gonna be the one to determine our destination, our actions, and anything else. Capiche?
Yeah, you speak of marketing, Grail. I did notice that Alisha was highlighted with this outfit as the cover for the DLC on the PlayStation Store, so I think you are quite literally correct about that.
okay.
Friggin' watch me, Rose.
Will do. But,
What?
you're talking funny. What happened to our old princess stiff as a board?
It's your
Speak for yourself, Grail. I'm Rose's best bud. I don't know about you.
manner. It's rubbing off on me.
It's okay. You can practice your normal girl persona on me. I won't mind.
I wasn't practicing anything.
The players are assembled, and the stage is
Oh no.
I will not dishonor the agreement.
Simone? Oh, I really hope they don't ruin Simone's arc, because I really liked the heartbreaking place we left her after our confrontation with her on the way to Helldolf. Although I am excited to see her again, because I did feel like she was a really interesting and sad character whom we only got a small window into. So hopefully they'll elaborate her story in an interesting way. Yeah, the real character development we look for in JRPGs is our own character development, Grail. What? Isn't that true, though? I mean, I should hope that's the most important character development that we actually get. Yeah, I think... You know, I still certainly would say she is not one of my favorite characters in the Tales series, because, I mean, that we're talking a high bar there. There are so many characters and so many great ones. But I think... here's kind of like one way of phrasing one of, I think, the overarching experiences that I'm having again and again as I've gone back through these Tales games as an adult, especially the ones that I didn't like as much initially as a kid. I think many times when I was first sitting down to play these games after I decided, okay, I really love this series, it's one that I want to invest in, when there were characters or events or storylines that were dissonant with respect to the broader series, or even just a particular stories or entry in the series, like where something felt kind of out of place or like it didn't belong, that would really upset me because it seemed like friction for really understanding and getting into the story. Now that I'm older and have a little bit of a different perspective, I feel like oftentimes part of what makes these games really interesting as unique titles is the way in which they do introduce friction to kind of first give you one way of viewing the world, but then challenge that or add nuance to it in a way that you didn't expect. And I think Rose is a really great example of that, where, yeah, she's really different than Saray. She doesn't, gel with your expectations of what the shepherd and his savior's journey is going to be like. But it turns out the more time you spend with her and you see what she's about and what her relationship with Dezel is, it's those differences that kind of give Saray, and I think just the whole shepherd's journey, exactly what it needs and what would have been kind of unavailable to it without someone like her to counterbalance Saray. So I think I do definitely, I at least have an appreciation for her as a character in a way that I didn't the first time around.
Indications are that the extremists are lurking somewhere in the buffer zone between Martland and Lastonville. Let's start our investigations in that area.
Fair enough.
I better let Sergei and the council know that I'll be tied up for a bit.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
Thought so. No biggie. I'll fire off a letter to inform them.
Cool. Sorry about that.
Get your damn head on straight, girl. Lady Lila, is something the matter?
Alisha tries to be down to earth.
Back to the old formal, Alisha. I'm actually a little disappointed.
Oh no, it's just natural for me to speak to Seraphim like you in this manner, to show respect.
Whereas I get no respect at all. Got it. Why would you say it like that? So you don't deny it?
That's not what...
Ugh, my ears. Shut up already.
Oh, sorry, Edna.
Just sorry, not Seraph Edna. I am consumed with infinite
Point taken, Grail.
Edna.
I won't argue
There's no
it.
need to pick on her. There is if it'll preserve our richly deserved respect.
My favorite character in Zestiria, I would say, not to say that I'm a simp for this character, because I would certainly not say that. But I'm a big fan of Edna. I think just her personality, her arc, her relationship with her brother, her kind of, like we were saying, just sardonic perspective on the world and the commentary that she gives throughout the game. I feel like it's a very unusual color for a Tales character, almost like sort of a wittier and more self-aware and lively version of Presea. I think we talked about this once about Edna in the past, but yeah, we have a lot of unique and fun characters in this game. Yeah, Stone Cold. That's it, right? Got it in one. Perfect character for the Earth Seraph.
Indeed. My apologies.
Her arc, no, this is the button on the joke. Her arc is rock solid and much more accurate than Scrap Toss, and that's all you can ask for.
Now, Rose, on the other hand, you're not into formality, right? You like people with a badass.
Something along those lines. Sure. You really don't have to force it, though.
Alisha merely hopes the two of you can view each other as equal.
That's not it.
There's nothing to be ashamed
It's Rose's fault.
What?
It's almost like Alicia's trying to be a chameleon and address everyone in the way that makes the most sense to that person, which makes me wonder whether by the end of this chapter she'll have a firmer sense of who she really is and the role that she wants to take for herself, or if she's just going to continue being that accommodating personality throughout.
Well then, Alisha, the Knights haven't found where the extremists are hiding, have they?
No, the military buffer zone is quite large. But we doubt they're near Lastonville. That area has been thoroughly investigated.
Then the next most likely candidate would be Glavin Basin.
Yeah, they certainly weren't at Falcon Hillside.
Something wrong?
There's a hidden spot in Glavin Basin that was sealed off by Edna. Not liking this.
Let's check it out.
Gotcha.
Alright, to Glavin. I guess I should check how we're doing on items before we roll off. Ha! Good call, Aaron. We definitely need a restock. Then we'll roll out. Fabulous. To Glavend.
Gotcha, Gald.
So Mikleo and Zavid are not with you.
Yeah,
That's what I said.
here. They're off looking for something.
I see. A pity.
Huh? You're not gonna ask why?
Yeah, that was exactly it, Grail. I had that thought and said to myself, oh, we're starting New Game Plus. Oh, and it's after the most brutal battle that we have had probably on the entire stream, so probably want a quick restock.
Actually, I like the idea of traveling with just us girls.
Quite so.
Truthfully, I've always wanted to try a slumbering party.
Slumbering party?
The Slumbering Party. An unassuming name for such a grueling ascetic movement.
Huh?
Together as a group, you endure a strict regimen of fasting and curbing of material desires while refining your communication, language, and data processing skills. If you don't wring out every last bit of your operation planning and budgeting expertise, you can easily be ground into dust. It's not for the faint of heart.
Edna! My goodness. It's not at all what
And if you fail, you have to do the Norman Carena as penance.
Deal? A battle with the dreaded beast, Pillow.
Monsters, even. The slumbering party. I had no idea it signified such a daunting endeavor.
That's right. It's not to be undertaken lightly.
Edna's just teasing Alisha here, right?
That is my hope.
See, now you could say this is just like, as you said, Grail, marketing or maybe fan service with what would it be like if Tales were a girl group. But I do feel like,
Finished preparing the bottles.
again, especially since this is described as Alicia's story, I feel like there is something that's kind of true to her character in this where, you know, she has like grown up and identified herself as a knight. And I think in some senses throughout like the last game kind of was not super in touch with the various aspects of her identity. Like she was kind of a noble, but she was also a knight more than anything else. And so it's interesting to imagine that as extended to also like not really having a lot of female friends or a sense of like how she relates to her own gender. So it's kind of, I guess I would say like believable to me that she would be actually really excited at this opportunity to just like hang out with other females and like have a different kind of social group than what she's been used to across her whole life. Grail, I'm banking on her bringing up the Norman dance. I'll be really disappointed if we don't see that. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned it on the stream, but I was kind of horrified is too strong, but the shortness of her shorts in her knightly uniform
Start our search, Rose.
was kind of a little shocking to me. Although, hey, you know, if we're doing a read of it where like she doesn't know how to adjudicate her identity as a knight with her gender, maybe you could almost do an explanation of the outfit as confused for that character-based reason. But yeah, I think it would have been easier to buy into with a full-on suit of armor or something.
I shall remain vigilant.
Oh, okay. These are only level 59. I was expecting them to be like 110 or something.
fortune telling. Please, pick one.
I was interested to see how much of the world was like directly the same as the previous game, not just in terms of locations, but also in terms of stuff like music and navigation versus how much it changed, but so far it seems pretty similar. This track I'm not sure if was in the last game. I know the forest navigation track was. I think this was also. I kind of found myself unconsciously hoping for new music, I think. I feel like especially if you're going to be staying in the same world, but kicking off another chapter, having a different score to it is a nice way of showing the development and the way that it's different even if it's the same. Oh no, Grail! I have to put the whole party on your back. Buckle up. I mean, you knew that was going to happen. That is what you were setting yourself up for. Yeah, but you made it hard. That was your whole goal. You can't have it both ways, dude.
Well done, everyone.
It's like putting the game up to max difficulty and then complaining about how hard it is.
There! Operation Fate success!
Well put. I have no counter argument there.
Well, that's a wrap.
Now we follow him, right? Hey, Rose!
You know what you are, Grail? You're that meme of, oh, well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. Have JRPGs taught you nothing? You create your own fate, my friend. I guess there's really not much point in these random encounters if they're all level, like, 60-ish, and we're already level 87. Nice to play Alisha a bit, though.
Incredible knife handling. Do you have anything?
I'm not hiding anything, I swear!
Alright, onward. Well, Dark Turtles, I still have some trauma from you, but I suppose I can see what you have for sale. Nah, I think we're okay. Oh, we can see him! He's getting away! Follow that hellion. How considerate that he stops to wait for us.
So it was here after all.
We were right to be worried.
Was there always a cave here?
This cave leads to the village of Camlon.
Camlon? The origin village?
Yep, this is the entrance from the Roland side.
The path had long been lost, but in the aftershocks of the cataclysmic battle with the Lord of Calamity, the way opened up once more.
Yeah, but I sealed it. I know I did.
Let's go.
Rose, wait! Even if we were to purify their malevolence, the fundamental problem won't be solved until they're properly apprehended. Let's report to Sergei and...
There's no time for that. Listen to me. We can't allow any humans to set foot in here.
Fine, let's go. What?
I thought you were gonna put up more of a struggle.
You wouldn't have backed down, would you?
Well, that's true.
Let's go.
Okay.
I can't tell if they really get along or not.
I think this is a fun setup for me too because I think because Rose and Alisha were two supporting characters in the main party of Zestiria who are now leading the charge on their own, it's easier for them to have two like very different perspectives and, like we just saw in that skit, kind of routinely get into arguments about how to proceed and kind of begrudgingly go forward with one another, whereas in a lot of JRPGs, I think the structure of the story is that the various members of the party band together because of their common interests, and after a certain point in the game, even if they have different personalities, they pretty much are always in agreement with one another in terms of what the next thing to do is and what the right path is. So it's a fun and I think pretty unusual thing to see, like the members of this party be working together for common ends, but not kind of reducing their identity to the commonalities that they share through that quest. It will be interesting to see whether we remain over-leveled for long, because I'm noticing the enemy levels are creeping up pretty quickly. The first enemies we faced were level 59, and now these are already 70. You get a Mystic Art! You get a Mystic Art! Everybody gets a Mystic Art! Okay, where are we going? Ribbon of Cosmos. It's a very cool name for a piece of equipment. Oh, interesting. So I was wondering why spears showed up in the shops at the end of Zestiria, but I guess maybe it's so they can carry over into the DLC, because I can't think of any other use for them. But that does go some distance towards explaining it in my head. Seems better. Yeah, why not? Let's try that. She's got all her arts. Might as well work on another title. I haven't looked at all their titles for a while. It's a nice little retrospective on all the places they've been on their journey and where they might be headed next.
Not in the mood, but oh
I think that's one of the reasons that I was dwelling on like the use of costumes earlier in the stream as well, because like I've mentioned before, I really love when games make storytelling meaning out of aspects of a game that you usually don't expect to have to do with the story, whether that's stuff like gameplay or like DLC, as we were talking about with the fact that this is DLC as opposed to something that was included in the main story, or just a straight up sequel, or even cosmetics like costumes. And I think the Tales game does a good job of not just having tropes in terms of its different cosmetics.
Aren't there ranks or hierarchies among the Seraphim?
Well, if you must know, whoever makes the best jokes is right.
Oh, we saw this before. I thought it might be a new one. But, you know, they have cosmetic tropes throughout the series, but then they also will turn around and do pretty interesting narrative things with them sometimes, whether that's particularly meaningful outfits, like we saw in Zestiria and in this, and even you might say with some of the like the optional outfits in Symphonia or Abyss or many of the other games. But then also like titles are the same way. I was thinking about this in Vesperia also, because one of the moments that I hadn't remembered from my first time playing it that was really touching to me going through it again, for those who have played the game and will know what I'm talking about, because we can't take like an hour to explain it all. But one of the centerpieces of the game is certain members of the party come together to form a guild, and the guy who's like inspired to do that, Carol, becomes the de facto boss, and the protagonist Yuri actually calls him boss, and then they have a pretty direct conversation where Carol says, look, you know, I'm a kid, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, I don't want you to call me boss when I feel like I haven't earned that title, so call me that once it makes sense, but I want you to just call me Carol for now. And then like just through that simple act, it becomes so much more touching later on in the game, where Carol basically finally commits this really inspiring act of bravery, and then that's the first time since that previous conversation that Yuri calls him boss. And I think little flourishes like that are possible and uniquely meaningful because they exist embedded in this particular series that has this whole history and universe built up around things like titles and costumes and what don't usually seem to contribute a lot to story, but once they're a part of your narrative language, you can do really cool things with them. Like trophies too, we were talking about that on the last stream or the one before.
I thought.
Yes. The Malevolence is already producing very powerful Hellions.
Let's hurry.
Yep, she's mad. Can't say I blame her.
Indeed. We went to the trouble of sealing this cave off. And now someone's reopened it.
There's something in Camlon that has to do with Saray, isn't there?
Oops, she noticed.
What?
Let's take care of this quickly.
I'm not gonna tell you.
I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, I know I said this last time, Grail, but it's crazy how much I've turned around on him, because he graded me so much in my first playthrough, and now it was like when he stood up to that monster on his own in the moment I was talking about, like I was genuinely moved. Like it was so inspiring to see a kid who had all of this, to me, really relatable self-doubt, just like take heart and kind of figure out who he was and also like what he wanted to be to the people he cared about, which seemed like the important thing that he was missing through a lot of his journeys to find himself. Yeah, I think he's also a kind of unusual and pretty unique character in the overall Tales corpus. I think there was a lot of the side content that I missed on my first time through it too, and I've been enjoying that this time. Like, little things with Carol, like how he can't sleep a lot at the ends because he's sort of restless and trying to figure out what the right thing to do with his life and how to be a leader and everything like that. The way he learns his mystic art by kind of forming this unlikely bond with the Dawn's grandson and actually like training with the Dawn's sword. There's a lot of optional depth to the struggles that he goes through and how he develops as a person. Hey, proud of you for beating the boss. See, challenges are hard, but that makes it all the more satisfying when you do them. Speaking of that and missable side content, I totally feel you, because I had forgotten how missable so much of it is, and then I was very frustrated because, without spoilers, because these are pretty big spoilers for the game, but I've been doing like all of the secret missions. So for those who don't know, in Vesperia, they basically have one distinct achievement per boss fight, where if you achieve some secret objective or do something that can oftentimes be pretty tricky, there's originally an Xbox achievement, but also now a PlayStation trophy associated with it. And one that I think is one of like the most interestingly narrative related ones that you can get in the game is also very missable, because you need to pick up an item from an optional scene way earlier in the game, and if you don't get it then, it like you very quickly miss the opportunity to get it, and then you can't go back and do it. So I was very sad to have missed that, almost so much that I might do a quick like a speed through New Game Plus of it just to get back to that scene and see it. But yeah, I'm very much of two minds about that, because I had that experience with Symphonia too. I'd forgotten how much of its side content was missable, and I think oftentimes that can be cool, because like that, when it's done right, that means the side content is really context dependent in the story and only makes sense at a certain time. And also, like when I was playing Symphonia as a kid and had infinite time on my hands, it was all the incentive in the world to go back and do a million New Game Pluses just to explore all the different paths and do all the different things. And I think that can be a really fun and rich way of exploring the world. But now, when I'm sort of more logistically concerned about the time it takes to get through a game and really just want to see all the stuff that I care about pretty efficiently, it is very frustrating, as you say, to get through a game and put in enough hours that you're really invested in the story and want to explore everything, and then look up online and realize, oh shit, I missed like half of the stuff that would have been really interesting to me because I just didn't know about the timing. And you can't look it up before the game to plan a strategy, because then it'll spoil the narrative arc of the game for you beforehand if you want to discover everything organically. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I was actually kind of just because like it's also a weird intersection where the more I've been playing some of the side content, the more I feel like a lot of it really contributes to the story, maybe in a way that could tie more of it together, which has got me kind of somewhat seriously considering a speed run after I'm done, even though I've already sunk way too many hours into it, just to try to catch some of that content that I missed. We'll see how it goes. Boy, there is kind of a bit of a jump in difficulty with only having 2 seraphims, so no bench to take advantage of, and then also not being able to armatize. Kind of having more struggle than I realized with that.
Let's get out of here.
I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about, Grail. Probably just a distant relative of Patty's, you know? Speaking of Vesperia. Oh, maybe it was. I might have missed that. That might have been why I was having an issue. Also, like we were talking about on a previous stream, it was in one of the least comfortable and most cramped locations to have a battle, so I'm sure that didn't help. Oh, I have to remind myself we can quick save now. It's definitely a different battle style, that's for sure. She was kind of refreshingly fun for me to try out when like she first got added to the party. But then I reach a point in JRPGs where I'm more interested in the characters that sort of make sense to me in the party as opposed to more of novelty characters. And I will admit I'm more interested in Patty's arc than I feared I might be, and so I'm really happy about that. But I don't know that in terms of like someone to main in my go-to party that she's gotten over the hump there versus characters like Estelle and Repeat and Rita and mainstays such as them. All right, let's see if this is more manageable in the open without a dangerous encounter. Oh yeah, and this is just a 2-monster party, so they probably also scaled down the number of enemies in accordance with the fewer members of our party. So you're probably right, Grail. I'll bet that was just a dangerous encounter and I didn't notice it. I'm gonna try to cycle in some new arts. Oh, actually, as I'm listening to it, this is a cool battle track. I feel like this was not in the last game. Yeah, sure, why not? Oh, that thunderclap one is cool. Yeah, she definitely struck me right out of the box as the kind of character who's kind of broken. Like, kind of like Mr. Game & Watch and Smash Bros. That kind of vibe of, like, broken RNG. To say nothing of the fact that they both have cooking-based attacks. Grail, just because it's on my mind from what you said, is it easy for you to tell me, without spoilers, what it is that I have to not miss in order to get the EX dungeons and that kind of stuff in Vesperia? So actually, I don't know that I remember, and I'm a little concerned about that. If it's something that I can still deal with at this point, which maybe I'm past that point already. I know enough to get the Devil's Arms, because that was something that I took the time to do and really impacted my first playthrough of it for obvious reasons. But I don't remember the stuff about the EX dungeons, which makes me wonder whether I ever did them in that game.
Is that it?
It appears so. I don't sense any more humans. Still, it's strange.
Quite. Even if we allow for the corruption of extremists, one wouldn't expect all of them to become Hellions, or for this area to have such concentrated malevolence.
Also, when I seal something, it doesn't just pop open again. Trust me.
Let's move on.
This is interesting. So we're heading towards Camlon, which shows how little I understand the overall geography of this world, because I never would have guessed that like Alisha and Glaven Basin were on opposite sides of Camlon. And we know that Simone is around, and sounds like she's working with another, well, either a Hellion or another evil Seraph. So I wonder whether the plot is like they're trying to find a way to revive Heldolf or something. That would be interesting, especially in sort of like a post-Christ narrative context, if they're trying to like resurrect the devil. Especially since Simone seemed to really be, even if she didn't love Heldolf, like have a deep, almost obsessive attachment to him. So it would make sense to me if she felt just totally lost without him and was trying to find a way to reclaim that. Got it. Yeah, I'll probably just look it up and hope for the best once I'm wrapping up my first replay, and then make a judgment call about whether it's worth it to go through again. I don't know that Lila used her Mystic Art a single time during the base game, but that was very cool to see. Concerto Infernus. Speaking of musical concepts, got a concerto themed attack. Boy, another thing that's really fun about this is similar to Vesperia just being much longer than what I expect from a Tales game. I truly have no concept of how long this is going to be. I feel like sometimes a DLC can be just a handful of hours, and sometimes it's like a full additional game, like something like Torna: The Golden Country. And so it's fun to be exploring this with fresh eyes and have like no idea how elaborate or long the arc is going to be.
What's going on? Alisha, watch out!
Edna would know Simone's trademarks anywhere. Little Miss Wrecked in the Head, that's a good one. Jesus. These are only level 62. Is it their spells that are wrecking us? Yeah, okay, I'm not going to do this.
Let's get out of here.
At least it didn't take that long to escape. I think we have food. Awesome.
Let's begin the purification.
Yeah, it feels really different. And I think it feels all the more different because the armatized character is not the one that I'm controlling. And the armatized character is, I mean, it's just a better character, right? It has beefier stats, it's stronger, and so I almost have this interesting sense so far that, like, the characters besides mine are carrying the day in battle, as opposed to the one I'm controlling, which is a pretty stark reversal of how I usually feel in Tales games and other JRPG party games. Well, I had this thought. I wondered whether it was even going to let you. Oh, looks like you can. But see, I feel like it's Alicia's story. It's focalized through her, and so I feel like the story wants you to play and experience it through Alisha rather than Rose. But I'm sure you're right. I have to imagine, especially after playing the base game, it would feel easier to play it as, well, as the shepherd now, I guess. But hey, you're doing your challenge run of Berseria, Grail, and we're accepting the challenge of playing as this paltry squire who can't armatize. Those snake women really giving me the most trouble. Oh, but I think they're going to corner us here. I forget how dogged they are in following you. I'm really hoping they give us an explanation for that. I don't want it to be something that's just a fact of life now, and Alicia's not going to ask and Rose isn't going to tell us. Maybe Simone will spill the beans. I feel like that's something that Simone would say just to needle everyone. Like, oh, you're not going to talk about this? I'm going to talk about it just to mess with your heads. Hey, Rose, remember that time I contrived a situation in Pendrago to force your, like, only friend and the seraph who had been with you forever to kill himself to save you? That was great, wasn't it? Oh, you know, it would be really cool. I don't know where this is going, as I've said, but I just had this thought, like, noticing that, again, we only have 2 Seraphim in the party so far, and we also have this girl group dynamic as part of what this story is about. It would be really interesting if, like, circumstances changed so that, you know, in the wake of losing Heldolf, they were able to actually, like, talk Simone into helping them and not going along with whatever evil plot she's currently involved in, so that she actually joins the party and can contribute to the battles. That would be pretty neat. Now I feel like I'm going to be bummed if they don't do that. That would be so much fun. Yeah, come on, Rose. You know I was just playing. It was a prank. I pranked you.
So this is the power of purification.
My intuition is... Wow. Can I speak on a Monday evening? My intuition is that using the focus attacks command is even more important here than it was in the last game, because since you only have one armatized character tops, you just have like less DPS to work with overall, it feels like. And so if everyone's attacking someone else, like this was part of what was happening in the first few battles that we had in this area, I think. Just enemies refused to die because we weren't dealing enough damage to any single one, which I think was putting us in a tighter spot than we needed to be in for a lot of these fights. It's Tales of Maze, I'm telling you. Some of those optional ruins in the base game, it was just nuts. Like, they really felt like labyrinths. More than most Tales games. Or some kind of uncanny PTSD invoking similarities to some of the really early dungeons in Fantasia and Destiny, where it's just impossible to figure out your way around, so you kind of just have to grasp for it on a wing and a prayer. Which is definitely a vibe in navigating JRPGs, but one considers it typically a more retro and hardcore vibe than one expects from modern Tales games. At least here we have a map, so we can get a sense of the overall maze as we struggle through it. What the hell are in these little side paths? I also like, is this just to add texture to the area? Because, I mean, look at this. It's this whole little intricate cutout in the map, but it doesn't seem like there's nothing back here. There aren't monsters, and there aren't items, and there aren't herbs. Bizarre. Well, there's an event in the main area here, so maybe things will change after that. Oh, is that right, Grail? Well, all the more reason I'll have to find some fan-localized version of that.
I finished preparing.
The one, wow, what a screen to pause on. I talked about this a few streams ago. I forget if you were here, but, oh shoot. I think it's called Junk Mountain or something in Tales of Destiny, where you have to go to find this, special, ancient, incredibly rare metal to repair the Draconis before you can go to the Ether Sphere. And that dungeon, like, poison gas, no map, everything looks the same, not even clear which walls you can or have to break down in order to forge the paths ahead. Like, I honestly thought going through that dungeon over the like half a day it took me to do it, I might have to just call it a day on Tales of Destiny. But, you know, there's a certain, like you're doing with your challenge run, right? There's a certain appeal to that kind of just grueling, seemingly impossible experience once you finally do get through it. Yeah, that emoji is actually modeled directly off of this face. Oh, I love it when a stream comes together.
Lady Maltran.
Oh, what? I was not expecting that.
Do you still see a teacher when you look at me? Don't.
Oh, but Simone is using illusions, obviously.
What are you doing?
That took me longer than it should have.
Let me see you struggle. Alisha!
Look out! You're awful.
Agreed.
Want me to do this?
No. I'll take this one. I have to.
No one will blame you if you can't. You sure?
Yes.
Man.
80. Yep, so the levels are climbing pretty steeply.
This is fine. We're doing this on our own. Just think of me as the heir at our side. This is my time. Remove your prey going
This is interesting too because I'm just like I'm continuing to think about where Simone's arc might go in this DLC, and remembering the fact that she's not actually a Hellion. At least the last time we saw her, she's a Seraph. I feel like there's something that's like inadvertently positive about the illusion she's created here, because Alisha clearly, even the last time she saw Meltran and in the last scenes where Saray was helping her to process that, like she clearly still has a lot of processing to do to understand like the role of Meltran in her life. And so like this illusion and projection of Meltran is an interesting way for her to directly confront Meltran with sort of a firmer understanding now of who Meltran really was, and sort of own up to and like therapeutically confront her own past. So even though Simone might be trying to stop them in the moment, I wonder whether in the big picture she's actually like in a skillful means kind of way helping Alisha without realizing it.
Any unpleasant truths you merely reject. The emotion-stunted impulse of a coward youth. That may be true, but I've made up my mind.
Have you now? Right out! It's over!
Noticed I'm an illusion, haven't you? What I see before me is reality and truth. Is that not what you taught me, Lady Meltran? So still, your work is absurd.
Oh, she has the same Mystic Art as Alisha. Kind of annoyed that she interrupted herself because I was really enjoying that dialogue. That's another interesting play on perspective, right? We were already talking about the way the game plays with visual representation to show perspective, but I think that really shows some interesting maturity and growth of perspective in Alisha, the way she says, look, yeah, it might be that Simone is creating some projection, but what I see and how I understand this is my reality and what I have to process and cope with. And so in that sense, the illusion can be as real to me as anything else that I face, if not more so, because it has richer emotional content. I know. Well, we do thankfully still have like 7 or 8 levels on her, I think. So we're not hugely over leveled, but we're at least on a par with the enemies, which is new relative to the EX dungeon, as you will remember, Grail. It's a refreshing change. This is also really quickly making me realize how much I leaned on armatization in the main game, which I knew, but you don't really know until the game takes it away from you, and it is definitely a challenge to relearn how to do combat without that as a live option. This might kill Alisha. Oh, no, wow, that's amazing. Actually left her with quite a bit of health. Relatively speaking, I guess. Yeah, well, emphasis on the ripoff, or at least less desirable. Well, because the difference, I think, right, is, while this has similarities to Grace's, this is very much like, well, in the DLC so far, right, it's like, it's not even a full system, it's a system that is very self-consciously missing one of the key elements that the whole system was built around, armatization, which I have to imagine is part of the point. So it doesn't feel like a complete system in the same way that Grace's combat does, because it's not. Right? You have like 3/4 of the system with Rose's Armatus, but not the same thing available to Alisha. Yeah, that's right. That's the long and the short of what I'm complaining about, Grail. I can't take pot shots at bosses from like a mile away with my fancy super-powered water gun. This might get her. No. Ah, so close. It would have been really satisfying to take her down with her own Mystic Art. Oh well.
I'm not letting you purify me. What truly needs purification is this entire world!
It's the same thing all over again. The real Maltran wound up killing herself, right?
Yeah, and with Alicia's lance.
Suicide by night,
Looks
they
like
call it.
Awful Girl plans to reenact the whole blessed thing. Should we intervene?
No.
Lady Maltran.
So you stay your hand and sympathize with your enemy, soft to the core. Of all your flaws, that might be...
Oh, wow.
What you hate about me the most. Isn't that right? Maltran. Farewell.
Uh-huh. So it was an opportunity to make a clean break with her past.
I think Rail, it follows the classic homicide exemption where it doesn't count as murder if it's a deeply symbolic reenactment of your own past in order to overcome a deep personal trauma. People get off for that all the time in court. It's a classic reason to be found not guilty for homicide.
You are such a doof.
Why?
Simone,
Why do you smile?
Who are you?
this is Simone, a seraph with the power to create illusions.
Everything just now was the work of Creep Girl here.
It was her?
Why do you smile when I tear open your wounds? How do you endure?
Thank you.
Huh?
For allowing me a chance to right my mistakes. I'm truly grateful. Thanks to you, I can step forward with a clear mind and know...
This is what I was saying.
That's our Alisha. Simone!
I see now what great potential our world has lost.
Hey, get back here and tell us what you know.
That is an interesting, thing to get out of the way that you're playing that game, Grail, because I oftentimes feel like it's so hard for me not to pick a character to main in a Tales game and then just have no facility with anyone else, which of course can shoot you in the foot if it ends up being one of those games that has a battle where you have to play as a single character against an enemy in one-on-one combat or something. But it seems like that could be a nice way of getting you to play around with and really get to know all of them.
Dear girl, you too carry a heavy burden.
Who, Simone's?
This was mere prologue. Will it be tragedy or comedy, I wonder?
What's her damage?
Yeah, she,
I think Simone may be questioning her place in the world. You can tell that she's trying to make a reassessment.
you know, she doesn't get a fair living wage from Heldolf, especially since he was executed by Saray, so she's had to cut corners on her budget for things like clothing.
Of Alisha?
And you. I imagine she's quite concerned. Concerned about those who walked with Saray, which path we will take, which beliefs will guide us.
With Saray.
Whoa, malevolence!
Well, haven't you tortured her enough?
Rose?
Alisha! How about a trip?
Huh?
To where Saray is?
What?
Oh,
Huh? You don't want to?
No, I do. But why now?
You coming?
Yes, of course I am.
Cool, let's get moving.
Whoa, wait up! Why did you suddenly change your mind?
I don't know. Maybe it's the result.
I'm not sure I follow.
I mean, you're radder than I thought. Ratter? I'm a rat? What?
You just told me.
The promise has been kept.
is that Lunar? I thought it sounded like him, but
It's to another.
Rose definitely killed him.
On. Such is the way of this transient world. You and I are but jesters, madly dancing through destiny's tangle. But know that this may be the last time our paths intersect.
I see how it is. I see very well.
We all have burdens.
The girl and her sniveling companions still place hope in the shepherd rat. Fate, eh? Makes me sick.
Confused about that. Simone was left very much alive, but I vividly remember Rose killing Lunar. What's going on? Yeah, and a memorable laugh, which means unless he has a doppelganger, or Simone has made an illusory friend for herself, we have some more things that need explanation. Simone is shaping up to be an interesting kind of character too. I can't think of any other examples of this from other stories that I've engaged with recently, but she's like this illusionist and trickster who like sets up these elaborate traps and trials for people like Alisha, but almost like she does it on some level because she recognizes that there's something about the world that she doesn't quite understand, like whatever it is about the human conditions that inspires these humans to persevere and try to improve the world and be true to themselves and help others. And so she's almost like treating these various like torture chambers as like little experiments to probe them and test their convictions so that it can like educate Simone herself and help her to understand this and maybe gain something that she's missing. Like she plays it off as a villain, but I think I think Lila was saying, it definitely seems like she's trying to process something and come to terms with her own place in the world as much as anything.
Chick back there. She used to work under the Lord of Calamity.
What? Isn't she a seraph?
She is, but it was not people or Seraphim who saw the true worth of her power, but the Lord of Calamity himself.
So she clung to him. He was the only entity she knew who valued her and her abilities.
And then Saray and I tore that from her.
I sense a commonality between her and me somehow.
Which part? Your stubbornness, or your stubbornness?
Not that.
Nice.
Maybe your stubbornness then.
Edna, you too?
Or your stubbornness?
It's okay to keep quiet when you can't think of anything.
Ouch! Stubborn!
That was your target? Really?
Rose, I'm no longer following the conversation.
Aha! You've got stub burnout.
Oh no, is it contagious?
What? Oh dear, I think we've completely derailed. And whose fault is that?
Alicia, if you're going to keep up with this group, you have to learn how to roll with the wordplay. That is an interesting diagnosis of Simone, that she clung to Heldolf because he was the only one who saw value in her and her abilities and place in the world. And that in itself might be an interesting thread to hold on to see if the DLC explores it further, because as we were talking about so much in Zestiria, like a huge part of that game's storytelling is just figuring out what it is that you see value in and acting in such a way as to promote that value. But the other half of that equation, which I don't think the base game was as explicitly concerned with, but which is just sort of the flip side or the corollary of that idea of figuring out what you value, is also like having others who see value in you and recognize that you are worth something. Because if you don't have that sense of self-worth and belonging in a community, it's hard for you then to like have standing or the spirit to ascribe value to anything else. And so that's really interesting, especially for a character like Simone, whom we didn't get to see much insight into in the last game in terms of why it was that she joined up with Heldolf. That the explanation could be, yeah, you know, the only way that she was able to act in such a way as to value anything was to team up with the one person who saw value in her. That's pretty sympathetic and pretty sad, honestly.
All the answers you seek lie up ahead in Camlon.
Camlon.
After the dragon fell, we all went to face the Lord of Calamity in our final battle.
Which took place in Camlon.
So Saray's path took him to Camlon, the origin village.
Yep, that was also where the Helionized Mautellus had been sealed away.
What? Meaning that the ultimate causes of the Age of Chaos were there in Camlon. Your hunch wasn't too far off, Alisha.
Of course, even if you'd made it there, you couldn't have gotten in anyway.
I would say no, Grail. I think one of the sad things, because we don't see that many interactions between the two of them in the first place, right? And one of the few that we do see, which is kind of the centerpiece of their relationship, is during the second fight with Heldolf in the middle of the game, when he's there with Simone and they're both fighting Saray and his team, and Heldolf is very clearly like willing and ready to use Simone basically as a tool and let her like very literally get in the line of fire with Saray in order to basically bait Saray into being prone for an attack by Heldolf. So he was like very ready to sacrifice her and use her in that way. So I think the sad thing about it to me, which really resonates with this theme that we're talking about right now, is that I think Heldolf really does just see her as this seraph whose powers are like useful as a tool for what he's trying to bring about. Of course, illusions are going to be helpful for spreading chaos and everything else that Heldolf cares about. yet despite the fact that he only views her as instrumentally valuable, that's still a kind of value that he's giving her. And for poor Simone, who doesn't see that coming from anywhere else in her life and is kind of unwilling to look elsewhere, that's kind of value enough and as good as it gets, which kind of, as I say it that way, makes me pity her even more.
Oh, why is that?
Cool your jets. We're explaining this in order.
I was talking about something similar with Dan, actually, because he's been playing through Tales of Symphonia for the first several times in his life, and so we've had occasion to talk a lot about the Tales games together. And we were talking about antagonists or something, but I think so many of these games, maybe JRPGs in general, but I feel like the Tales series has a special way of doing this. Like, they set up their system of antagonists so that the ultimate antagonist, so someone like the Helldolf or the Mythos of the group, isn't someone with whom it's really easy to sympathize because they're kind of so entrenched in their ideology that it's almost hard to see the humanity in them or what relatable factors might have led them to become what they are. But then those unsympathetic antagonists are surrounded by these, like, this cast of supporting characters and antagonists who all have kind of much more human and sad stories for how they ended up falling in with this antagonist and basically serving them. So thinking about Simone in that light, thinking about the god generals in Tales of the Abyss, thinking about Mythos's whole cabal of, like Pronema, and I guess you could kind of think of Kratos in this way, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, I think a lot of the antagonists in the Tales series, but I think a big part of what makes them interesting is the group of kind of the villain JRPG parties with which they surround themselves.
Cave wasn't passable before, correct? How were you able to enter Camlon then?
We came through the sealed path from Alisha.
Elysia? Soray's hometown?
Yep. Bartlow had sent troops to invade the village, but... Oh wait, you knew that part, didn't you?
Yes. In the chaos, I missed the news of their deployment.
Well, what happened was Kittybeard went and smashed Alicia's blessed domain, then lured them in.
Oh, here we go again. It's all my fault.
But it's true!
Well, that's the problem when your whole goal is an age of lifeless beings, right, buddy?
Damn right you aren't.
That's one of your problems, at least. That being your end game comes with a few problems, I think.
Rose?
Let's go, normal girl.
Don't make fun of me.
It was a compliment, I thought.
Unlikely.
These two.
It's fun, right? And you just that's not a color that a lot of JRPG parties have, because I think it cuts against the grain of like traditional JRPG storytelling. But what a cool way to go in like a different direction in something like a DLC where you've created the narrative space too with the loss of Soray. 100%. Yeah, totally agree with you, Gro.
Well now, that was a big sigh.
Lila, no, never mind. It's nothing.
It's nothing inevitably means it's something. I'm here if you need to get anything off your chest.
I just don't know what to do with myself. I don't know if I want to live life as a princess, or a politician, or as a knight. Or if I want to throw off all those ties and just try to be a normal girl. Or if I want to live life as a squire, purifying malevolence throughout the land.
And you feel the need to find the answer to that, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm to be a stateswoman, serving my country and my people. I know this and accept it. And yet, life has never been so fulfilling as when I'm traveling together with all of you. I'm worry that I don't believe in my answer after all.
To find one's answer, I agree that this is a very important thing. I told this to Saray and Rose as well.
Exactly. That's why...
Alisha, may I ask you this? Does gaining one's answer necessarily mean losing something else?
Huh?
That's all I can say for now.
You spoil her too much.
Sometimes we all need hints, Rose.
You never gave us any hints.
Maybe not, but this journey is soon to reach its end.
We won't get to plod on and on in search of the answer like it was with you and Saray.
Oh, this is interesting.
Sure enough.
They're almost messaging that it's going to be a short journey as opposed to a longer one.
Answer.
I wonder. That'll be interesting if it's like a very short DLC. It's because I feel like that also kind of goes against the grain of typical JRPG storytelling, even for DLC these days. Yeah, I wonder about that, Grail. I had this thought also, like, yeah, part of it, no doubt, is probably be whatever you want. But I think there's something interesting in Alicia's case, too, where, like I was talking about at the top of the stream, we saw how she diverged from Saray because she recognized, like, yeah, I have this duty to my country. I have to be this statesperson who can influence events to better my people because that's what I'm bound to do for the sake of this moment in time and the station I find myself in. But I feel like what we're seeing now as kind of life goes on, and again, this is the kind of thing that I think a bonus follow-on DLC is uniquely suited in terms of its relationship to the story to show you is, yeah, that was the role and the duty that Alisha had at that moment in time, but life goes on, and just because that was your duty and the role you had to play then, that can be the right thing for you to do at that moment, but it can also be the case that at some point you're released from that duty, or you can have the option to guide yourself according to some other principle. So I think, especially following up on a game where Saray's entire kind of universe and life was subsumed under the single role and path that he chose and his one answer, it's interesting to suppose, like Lila seemed to be hinting at the end of that skit, that perhaps part of Alicia's lesson is it's possible to value things and act in accordance with them and give yourself that sense of duty, but also to, like, change that sense of duty and what it is that you believe and value as you go through life, and your own station in the world and your position and what you experience changes. And part of that flexibility is what allows you to value things at all. Yeah, I knew that was coming. How are we on levels now? 70. Okay, it's doable. Wonder what options we get if we talk to Rose. Not many. I was going to say it's such a funny left turn from the main game to have this whole little motif of slang, but I guess that is pretty closely affiliated with ideas of wordplay, which were super central, as we talked about over and over again, to the story that the main game was telling. So maybe not that far afield after all. Yeah, and obviously it was totally not planned on my part, but I also feel like the Sparrow Feathers outfit we have Rose in now, or the merchant outfit, whatever it's called, also like more nicely complements Alicia's outfit. So it does feel like it gives them a bit of a nice synergy as a group. I like her Scattered Bones outfits too, and it wasn't totally clear to me in the main game, especially since outfits oftentimes have such symbolism in the Tales games, like what her other like red outfit was supposed to represent. Maybe just the fact that she was going off on an adventure that didn't have anything to do with the Sparrow Feathers or the Scattered Bones.
Let's do some fortune telling, please.
But yeah, it also struck me as a little more generic as opposed to a lot of these other outfits that are a bit more stylized and stylized in ways that are meaningful to the character and their roles. We got Hellions, we got dangerous encounters, we got quick saves. I don't want to run away from all the dangerous encounters. They just seem, well, very dangerous. I guess we are going to avoid that one.
You said that the way to Camlon was sealed off in Alisha, right? Was Saray aware of that?
There were, well, circumstances.
That doesn't tell me anything.
It's kind of convoluted. I don't know how to really explain it all.
Lila?
Convoluted, intricate, elaborate, complex, labyrinthine.
Like a dungeon in Tales of Zestiria.
Comes from the long-abandoned tongue of an ancient empire. The curious and refined dialect of the Norman represents a divergent branch of this language. In this case, scholars have traced its origin to the words con, together, and volver, to roll, hence, tangled up!
What? Huh?
Hint, don't ask Lila.
Then may I depend upon you, Edna?
You want me to do the honors? That's some guts you've got there.
If it's not too much trouble.
All right, but prepare yourself.
Prepare myself?
Nautilus only became a Hellion because Highland and Rollins got Camlon wrapped up in their petty war between Earth dwellers. The previous Shepherd's sister, Muse, felt personally responsible for the misdeeds of humanity, and so she gave herself as a sacrifice to seal the path. But only after she had entrusted Saray and Weebo to Zenris. That's the one they call Gramps. They were just wee little babies, you see. Weebo.
Weebo.
So Zenris raised Saray and Weebo in Alisha, planning to tell
But very different kinds of trolls, Grail.
Now, in order to learn more about Kittybeard, as in Heldoff, the Lord of Calamity, we sojourned to Logrin to consult with Maven, the storyteller of time, who...
Oh my goodness. I need a day.
I think we'll call it a day here. Good night.
Hey, no fair.
What, my painstaking summary is boring you?
Oh, no, I didn't mean that.
Listen close. This next part is extremely crucial. The ancient empire Lila mentioned, it was a hegemony of the normies, by the normies, for the normies.
Normies?
Normies.
I'm a little unclear what this has to do with the seal at Camlon.
So I am boring you?
No, not at all.
It was then that the turtles and the dark turtles had their...
No! Acid flashbacks.
Morning.
Good morning, Rose.
My word. Was Mikleo really okay with that?
I don't know.
Edna!
It was probably hard on him, yes.
They're still at it?
I'm afraid so.
Yet he accepted that his mother had given her life for her answer. And that gave him the courage to continue on.
Yeah, super annoying.
Not at all. Such conviction is admirable.
Rose, do something. Make it stop.
Huh? Me?
So even you were no match for Alisha.
This is no mere girl. It's a monster.
Edna reminds me of when my buddy Matt came in to guest star in the middle of the Dawn of the New World stream, having basically no background in JRPGs and absolutely no background in Tales of Symphonia. And I tried to give him a succinct synopsis of Symphonia and Dawn of the New World up to that point in like 5 minutes. Spoiler alert, it did not go as well as things just went for Edna. But we got through it. He actually had a much easier time following everything than I expected. You never try to synopsize a Tales game in 5 minutes. I'll tell you though, Grail, after having like several of my friends and colleagues guest star on the stream over the last few months, I've gotten like much better at that than I ever thought I would be. And it helps, like, I don't know if you or anyone else watching this ever has trouble like keeping JRPGs straight in your head. I will freely confess that I do. And I do feel like just, even if you don't have an audience, just like talking to your cat or dog or yourself about just like, okay, here are the 4 things you need to know about what's happened in the story so far. That can really sort of force you to distill a lot of it down to like, what is the story actually trying to say and what's at the heart of it. Because oftentimes when you go through these games that can be anywhere from 50 to 150 hours, it can be hard to see the forest for the trees unless you do kind of take a step back. This just seems like a bad situation. No, that's an even better skill to have, Grail. I really admire that. I have a hell of a hard time keeping the plots from games I haven't played super recently, like, vividly organized in my head in terms of all of the detailed events. So I really have a lot of admiration for people with the minds to manage all of that overhead. It is definitely a skill, though. Like really, since my Xenoblade and Final Fantasy VII binge last year for all of the work I was doing and with A Terrible Fate, I've just kind of obviously continued to lean into JRPGs because I do feel like as much as any other work you can do, it's a muscle that you can sort of train to just get better at navigating them, keeping track of what you need to keep track of. Whereas if you just play them now and then, it can feel like a really daunting and impossible undertaking to manage it all.
What's up?
You were able to save the Seraph Zenris, right? Oh no.
Lord Zenris may have been absorbed into that man, but he continued to point Saray to the right path, even until the end of his life.
And Saray lived up to his Gramps' expectations.
So Kittybeard could pull out all the dirty tricks he wanted. Still did him no good in the end.
Yep, that's pretty much what we're talking about. That's the beauty of JRPGs, though, right? Simultaneously, they can be so convoluted and silly, and yet incredibly good at distilling like key and very complex human insights into just the nature of existence and life, the universe, and everything. And without either that sophisticated cerebral nature or deep sense of silliness, it would not be the genre that we so know and so love.
Indeed, the bonds uniting Saray, Mikleo, and Lord Zenris are robust. Even the vile machinations of that man could not so easily corrupt them.
I still don't quite understand. Why was Heldoff so fixated on Saray?
Fixated? His end goal was to fill the entire world with malevolence.
That was the answer he arrived at after years of unimaginable loneliness and despair.
He just wanted someone else. A friend.
A friend.
Of course, even if he'd succeeded in corrupting Saray through Gramps' murder, it still wouldn't have made them friends. Sometimes, you don't realize that it's your own actions pushing you further and further away from what you truly desire.
That is probably the most succinct comment on like malevolence and what the game is trying to say about it, I think. Not that, obviously it says many more things about it like we've talked about, but kind of going down from all of the fantasy terms to like something that is, like we were just talking about, very human and relatable and applicable to life. I think that line of Rose hits the nail on the head. Sometimes you don't realize that it's your own actions pushing you further and further away from what you truly desire. That's all malevolence is.
What? Rose, you are quite radical too.
Huh?
Only sometimes, though.
Yes, sometimes radical. Guys.
Surely this is fancy. I knew it!
That was interesting too. I don't want to lose this thought before we move on. That kind of interpretation of Heldolf that the Seraphim, Lila, and Edna were offering there, and Rose, I think, that Heldolf wanted a friend, and that's why he was so fixated on Saray. Because remember, one of the things that was key in terms of why Rose joined the party and why she was important early on, even though she seemed kind of out of left field, was that in contrast to Alisha, who didn't have the same level of resonance as Saray, Rose was really someone who could share Saray's burdens and like be another human to whom he could relate across his journey as the shepherd. And so it is kind of like sad to think that Heldolf on some level recognized that he was lacking that kind of intimate human understanding that, you know, you would get from a shepherd-squire relationship or just a real friendship. And so he was trying to like balance his life by bringing someone else into his like fun house of horrors on equal footing. Because obviously he had people, followers like Simone and Maltran, but they were kind of, I guess, similar to Alisha in the sense of following him without being on a par with him. Sad to think that he had that kind of sixth sense for like his need for redemption or something he was missing, but couldn't figure out how to satisfy it.
Retreat!
I'm just going to dip out to the next area here.
I am your opponent.
Boy, so I wonder whether this DLC, if we're heading to Camlon, is actually going to give us the opportunity to see Saray and Nautelis in stasis. That would be interesting. And maybe in that way it could be a cool kind of wraparound or bookend to the title card, that image behind the opening select screen of Saray and Nautelis sleeping in their suspended stasis. Because you have to suppose, like, if that's recorded in a ruin in the future, people actually saw them or at least imagined them in that state. So it would make sense if we, you know, went all the way to Camlon and bore witness to them.
All together now. 1, 2.
So we're going now? Wait,
Oh,
what's
come
our
on,
cue?
guys.
I know, so these are the, I guess, the mountains leading into Camlon from the other side.
Low on health.
And yes, I was just having the same thought. The enemies have pretty quickly gotten nuttier than I was expecting. But hey, you know, bright side, right, Grail? At least we went all the way through Hexen Isle and the Calyx, so we're as prepared as we can be for this content. You imagine if we were jumping into this without taking the time to do the EX dungeon? I would definitely be throwing many more expletives than I am right now. Looks like we want to go this way first. Is this a crucible for Alisha? Of course it is. Of course it is. In front of Malevolent Crucible. Maybe we can go back to that. I'm not even gonna break the seal on that right now. I don't know why I'm surprised. Of course they would have a DLC one for Alisha. That's interesting. It looks on the map as though someone's here, but I can't see anyone. Oh, Grail, you're getting me so excited for the Tales of Berseria playthrough. Fair and balanced, right? That's what it's all about. Yeah, that might actually be what's going to happen in this DLC. Arriving at Soray and bearing witness to him, because that seems to be what the mission directive is, going to where he rests. I somehow completely turned myself around, which I'm delightfully happy that I realized now, because otherwise I probably would have wandered all the way back through that same section of cave. Maybe that's what the little map indicator was that I thought was pointing out a person who didn't appear to be on the map. Maybe that was showing us that was where we entered this part of the map from. Better to find that now than later.
Look.
Is that it?
Yes, the road to Camlon. The Elaine route. I'm
Oh.
not liking this.
Huh?
We still haven't come across whoever's been attracting all the malevolence.
Maybe they're hiding from us? Coward.
Yes, I feel a sense of guile and slyness, almost like a presence watching us.
Perhaps they went in ahead of us.
Let's go.
Oh yeah, that's pretty brutal, Grail.
All right. Don't worry. I'm taking you to where Soray is.
Okay.
Some bosses, I do feel like that's kind of a Tales thing in a lot of the games. Just like every now and then there'll be a boss that has an attack that like has no business being as devastating as it is, and there's not really much you can do about it.
Is it really going to be all right?
It'll work out somehow.
You're so strong, Rose.
People keep saying that. I couldn't tell you if it's true, though.
Well, like you said earlier, two things can be true, right? You can make the game difficult on purpose and still be annoyed by it. You're allowed. I'll probably continue trolling you for it, but you're allowed.
Have I angered you?
Huh? No, I'm good.
She's feeling the pressure.
Yes, I'm a bit concerned. One can never tell what Rose may do when she's like this.
All right, well, we are at the precipice of the ruins leading to Camlon. We're rounding the 3-hour mark. And especially since I'm not sure how long this DLC is, I think it might be nice to try to savor it for at least 2 streams, since the Seraphim seem to signal it might be one of the shorter installments in the series. So I think rather than continuing on to these ruins, I'm going to call it here. But yeah, I am so delighted. I guess I should not be surprised that the Tales series, given all the thought that is put into everything that comes out in it, is doing something interesting and cool with its DLC. But I'm already feeling like, for all the reasons we've talked about and more, Grail, this seems like a really cool kind of twist on some of the typical storytelling you expect in a JRPG, an interesting elaboration on these characters and their relationships, and raising a lot of interesting questions that I hope we get more color into in terms of, you know, what's happened to Rose in the 3 months between like the end of her adventure with Soray and where we're at now, what the future is going to look like for Alisha, what's going on with Simone, who the mystery antagonist is with whom she's allied now. Yeah, it's nice to be diving into this on the one hand, totally fresh, but on the other hand, totally prepared with having just done our homework with Zestiria. And I think that'll be a really great platform to dive into Berseria with after this. How long do I think the quality will stay at this level for the... What do you mean, Grail, for like as we're playing through the DLC, or do you mean in the like the Tales series more broadly? Yeah, I'll say, just especially with the good time I've been having revisiting all the games, I would say I'm pretty optimistic given just the few hours we've played so far, and the fact that, like I said, the Seraphim explicitly messaged that this is going to be a pretty short and contained adventure. I'm cautiously confident that it feels like the kind of story that is going to be pretty tight, like a well-oiled machine in its message. So I would be more surprised if it suddenly fell off in its quality than if it stayed this consistent all the way through and had some really interesting things to say about the characters, especially because like an additional story episode as DLC is so unusual for this series that I feel like they probably wouldn't have done it unless they had a really clear vision of what they wanted to say and how it related in an interesting way to Zestiria and maybe even to Berseria, following up on this in the past, as prequels do. So I don't want to jinx it, so knock on wood. You never know with anything, but at least I think it's fair to say I'm excited to see where it's going, and delighted to be going through it with you, who has also not played it before, so nice to have a viewing party that's on the same footing with this stuff. But yeah, don't drive yourself crazy with your crazy challenge run of Berseria. I will be there for a different kind of run through Berseria with you on Tales of Praxis very soon. But yeah, really excited to dig into fresh content. It's a nice vibe to be doing that on the stream. I'll admit I was a little nervous to do something that was total virgin territory for me. But it's, really rewarding and nice to dig through and think through some of this stuff on the fly and live with you here. So, Grail, thank you as always to you, my friend. Other members of the dear audience, thank you for checking this out. I hope you've enjoyed another installment of Tales of Praxis. We will be back seeing what else Alicia's story has to offer us the same time on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm really looking forward to it. Hope to see you there. And as always, game well in the meantime. So cheers. See you back here soon enough. I'm Aaron Suduko for With a Terrible Fate and Tales of Praxis. See you all soon.